The desert sun blazed mercilessly over the Iraqi city of Fallujah as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her body armor one final time. The weight of her equipment felt familiar now after 18 months of deployment, but today something felt different. The air carried an unusual tension that made even the most experienced soldiers uneasy. Maria had joined the army at 19, driven by a desire to serve her country and escape the poverty of her childhood in East Los Angeles. Her parents had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but hope and determination, working multiple jobs to give their children better opportunities. When Maria announced her decision to enlist, her mother wept for 3 days straight, clutching the rosary beads that never left her hands. Now 26, Maria had earned the respect of her unit through countless missions in some of the most dangerous areas of Iraq. She was known for her quick thinking, steady aim, and unwavering commitment to bringing every soldier home safely. Her squad trusted her completely, and she had never let them down. The morning briefing revealed their assignment, a routine patrol through the Jolan district, an area where insurgent activity had been reported but nothing too concerning. Intelligence suggested minimal threat levels, and the mission was classified as standard reconnaissance. Maria studied the maps carefully, noting potential escape routes and danger zones out of habit. Her squad consisted of 6 soldiers, each handpicked for their skills and reliability. There was Corporal James Wheeler, a sharpshooter from Montana whose steady hands never trembled under pressure. Private First Class Ahmed Hassan, a translator whose knowledge of Arabic had saved countless lives. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez provided comic relief but was deadly serious when it mattered. The team also included Private Lisa Chen, a medic whose quick treatment had pulled numerous soldiers back from death's door. As they prepared to move out, Maria noticed her radio operator. Specialist Danny Morrison seemed unusually quiet. The 20-year-old from Ohio typically chattered constantly about his girlfriend back home and their wedding plans. Today he methodically checked his equipment in silence, his usual smile replaced by focused concentration. The convoy consisted of 3 armored vehicles, moving in standard formation through the narrow streets of Fallujah. Children watched from doorways, their faces mixing curiosity with wariness. Some waved tentatively while others ducked inside when the Americans appeared. The street smelled of dust, diesel fuel, and something else Maria couldn't identify. Everything appeared normal for the first 2 hours of patrol. They conducted routine checks at predetermined locations, spoke with local residents, and documented anything unusual. The heat was oppressive, even inside the air-conditioned vehicles, and sweat constantly dripped beneath their helmets and body armor. Around noon, they received orders to investigate reports of suspicious activity near an abandoned school building. Local informants claimed they had seen armed men entering and leaving the structure over the past several days. The building sat at the end of a narrow alley, surrounded by residential homes where families still lived despite the ongoing conflict. Maria felt her instincts screaming warnings as they approached the target location. Something about the positioning felt wrong. The street was too quiet, too empty for midday in a residential area. Windows that should have shown signs of life remained dark and shuttered. Even the ever-present street dogs had disappeared. She radioed her concerns to command, requesting permission to abort the mission or at least call for additional backup. The response came back negative. Intelligence indicated minimal threat, and command wanted the building cleared before evening. Maria reluctantly acknowledged the orders, but she quietly signaled her team to maintain maximum alertness. The squad dismounted 2 blocks away from the target, leaving 1 soldier with each vehicle as planned. Maria led her team through the maze of narrow alleys, using hand signals to communicate as they approached the school. The building appeared deserted from the outside, with broken windows and graffiti covering the walls. Private Hassan spoke quietly with an elderly woman who emerged from a nearby house. She seemed nervous, constantly glancing toward the school building while speaking in rapid Arabic. Hassan's expression grew troubled as he translated her warnings about bad men who came at night and sounds of digging from beneath the school. Maria made the tactical decision to approach from multiple angles, splitting her team to cover all possible escape routes. She would enter through the main entrance with Morrison and Chen, while Wheeler and Rodriguez circled to the rear. Hassan would remain at a safe distance to coordinate with the vehicles if needed. The school's main door hung open, creaking softly in the desert breeze. Maria's weapon was ready as she stepped across the threshold, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior. Broken desks and debris littered the hallways, and Arabic writing covered the walls. The smell of something rotting mixed with the metallic scent of old blood. They moved methodically through the first floor, clearing each classroom and storage area. Everything appeared abandoned, but Maria noticed fresh footprints in the dust and recently disturbed debris. Someone had definitely been using this building, and recently. Her radio crackled softly as Wheeler reported similar signs of activity near the rear entrance. The stairway to the second floor was partially collapsed, forcing them to climb carefully over broken concrete and twisted metal. Maria led the way, testing each step before putting her full weight down. Morrison followed closely, his radio equipment making soft electronic sounds that seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. On the second floor, they discovered evidence of recent occupation. Sleeping mats were arranged in one classroom, and empty food containers suggested multiple people had been staying there. Most concerning were the weapons cache remnants and ammunition boxes scattered throughout several rooms. This was clearly more than just a hideout. Maria was photographing the evidence when Morrison suddenly grabbed her shoulder and pointed toward a window facing the street. Through the broken glass, they could see armed figures moving into position around the building. The elderly woman's warnings had been accurate, but now it was too late to retreat safely. The realization hit her like a physical blow. They had walked directly into a carefully planned ambush. The intelligence had been wrong, or worse, deliberately misleading. Her squad was trapped in a building surrounded by hostile forces, with limited ammunition and no easy escape route. Maria immediately radioed their situation to Wheeler and Rodriguez, ordering them to hold their positions and prepare for contact. She also called Hassan to request immediate backup from the convoy, knowing it would take precious minutes for help to arrive. Every second now counted as the enemy completed their encirclement. The next few minutes would determine whether her squad lived or died, and Maria prepared herself for the fight of her life. The first shot shattered the afternoon silence like thunder, sending chunks of concrete flying from the window frame where Maria crouched. She instinctively pulled Morrison and Chen down as bullets whistled overhead, the distinctive crack of AK-47 fire echoing through the abandoned school. Her training kicked in immediately, and she began calculating their tactical situation with deadly calm. Through her radio, she heard Wheeler's voice reporting contact from the rear of the building. At least 8 hostiles had surrounded their position, with more likely moving into the area. The sound of feet running on concrete suggested additional fighters were entering the building from multiple points. What had seemed like a routine patrol had become a coordinated attack, designed to trap and eliminate her entire squad. Maria quickly assessed their immediate surroundings. The classroom offered limited cover, with desks that wouldn't stop rifle rounds and windows on 2 sides that provided firing positions for the enemy. A narrow hallway led to other rooms, but moving through it would expose them to crossfire. Their best option was to consolidate their position and hold until backup arrived. She grabbed Morrison's radio and called for immediate close air support, knowing that helicopter gunships were their only realistic chance of survival. The response was not encouraging. The nearest aircraft was 20 minutes away, and the convoy backup was still navigating through hostile territory to reach them. They would have to hold their position against superior numbers for at least that long. The enemy fire intensified, with bullets striking the walls around them in steady streams. Maria could hear different weapons firing from various positions, indicating a well-coordinated attack by experienced fighters. These weren't desperate insurgents making a random strike. This was a planned military operation designed to capture or kill American soldiers. Chen crawled over to treat a minor shrapnel wound on Morrison's arm, while Maria established communication with Wheeler's position. The sniper reported that he and Rodriguez were pinned down behind a concrete barrier near the rear entrance, with at least 4 hostiles trying to flank their position. The enemy was systematically closing off all escape routes. Maria made rapid decisions about ammunition conservation and tactical positioning. Each soldier carried limited rounds, and resupply was impossible under current circumstances. Every shot had to count, and they needed to make the enemy pay heavily for any ground they gained. She positioned herself at the main window with the best view of approaching attackers. The psychological pressure was enormous, as bullets continuously struck around their position. The sound was deafening, and concrete dust filled the air, making it difficult to breathe or see clearly. Morrison's radio crackled with status updates from other units, but None were close enough to provide immediate assistance. They were truly on their own. Private Hassan's voice came through the radio with urgent Arabic translations he was intercepting from enemy communications. The insurgents were planning to storm the building from 3 directions simultaneously, using grenades to clear each room. They had studied American tactics and were adapting their strategy to counter expected defensive moves. Maria realized their position would become untenable once the enemy launched a coordinated assault. She made the difficult decision to attempt a fighting withdrawal to a more defensible position on the first floor. The movement would be extremely dangerous, but staying put meant certain death or capture when the grenades started flying. She explained the plan quickly to Morrison and Chen, then coordinated with Wheeler to provide covering fire during their movement. The timing had to be perfect. Too early and they would be caught in the open. Too late and the enemy assault would trap them upstairs. Maria counted down from 3 and they moved. The sprint down the damaged stairway was terrifying, with bullets following their movement and chunks of concrete exploding around them. Chen stumbled on loose debris, but Morrison grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. Maria fired controlled bursts at muzzle flashes in the windows, trying to suppress enemy fire long enough for her team to reach better cover. They made it to the first floor as the enemy assault began in earnest. Grenades exploded in the rooms they had just evacuated, filling the upper floor with smoke and flying debris. The sound was tremendous and Maria's ears rang as she tried to maintain radio contact with her scattered team members. The ground floor offered slightly better defensive positions, with thicker walls and fewer windows. Maria positioned her team to cover the main approaches while maintaining communication with Wheeler and Rodriguez. The enemy was now inside the building, and she could hear boots on the floor above as fighters moved through the rooms they had abandoned. Hassan's voice provided crucial intelligence as he continued monitoring enemy radio traffic. Additional insurgent reinforcements were arriving to ensure no Americans escaped alive. The local population had been ordered to stay indoors while the attack was completed. This was clearly a high-priority operation for the enemy forces. The fighting intensified as insurgents attempted to advance down the stairway. Maria's accurate fire forced them back twice, but they kept probing for weaknesses in the American defensive positions. Morrison called in their precise coordinates to the incoming air support, knowing that close airstrikes might be their only salvation. During a brief lull in the firing, Maria heard the distinctive sound of a rocket-propelled grenade being loaded somewhere above them. She immediately ordered her team to take cover behind the thickest available walls, knowing that RPG rounds could penetrate most of their current protection. The explosion would likely collapse part of the building. The RPG struck the wall near their position with devastating force, filling the room with smoke and debris. Morrison was thrown against a wall but appeared uninjured, while Chen suffered cuts from flying concrete fragments. Maria's body armor absorbed most of the impact, but the concussion left her temporarily disoriented. Through the smoke and dust, she could see enemy fighters beginning to advance through the breach created by the RPG. Their assault was methodical and professional, with covering fire from multiple positions while assault teams moved forward. Maria knew they had only minutes before being overrun. She made radio contact with the incoming helicopter support, providing target information and requesting immediate strikes on enemy positions surrounding the building. The pilot confirmed visual contact with the school and reported numerous hostile fighters in the area. Air support was finally available, but Maria's team had to mark their position clearly to avoid friendly fire. The sound of approaching helicopter rotors gave Maria hope for the first time since the ambush began. But the enemy fighters were also aware of the incoming aircraft and intensified their assault to eliminate the Americans before air power could turn the tide. The next few minutes would determine who lived and who died. Maria prepared her team for the final phase of the battle, knowing that survival depended on holding their position just a little longer. The helicopter's weapons could devastate enemy positions, but only if her squad could avoid being overrun in the next crucial moments of the fight. The Apache helicopter's chain gun opened fire with a sound like ripping canvas, sending streams of high-explosive rounds into enemy positions around the school building. Maria felt a surge of relief as she watched insurgent fighters scramble for cover, their coordinated assault suddenly disrupted by devastating fire from above. But her celebration was premature. The enemy had prepared for air support. From a rooftop 2 blocks away, an insurgent fired a shoulder-launched missile at the Apache. Maria watched in horror as the aircraft took evasive action, deploying flares while the missile streaked past its tail rotor. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through Morrison's radio, reporting that multiple surface-to-air missiles were being fired from concealed positions throughout the neighborhood. The enemy had turned the entire district into a killing zone, with pre-positioned weapons and fighters ready to engage any American rescue attempt. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a carefully planned operation designed to shoot down aircraft and inflict maximum casualties on any relief force. Maria realized they were facing a much larger and better organized enemy than anyone had anticipated. Despite the missile threat, the Apache pilot continued attacking enemy positions while calling for additional support. His accurate fire forced insurgent fighters to abandon their assault on the school, but they quickly regrouped in buildings where the helicopter couldn't engage them effectively. The reprieve was temporary, and Maria knew the ground assault would resume once the aircraft was forced to withdraw. Wheeler's voice came through the radio with urgent information about enemy movement. From his sniper position, he could see fighters, carrying what appeared to be chemical weapons or explosives into the building next to the school. They were preparing something that would eliminate the Americans even if they couldn't be overrun by direct assault. Maria made the desperate decision to attempt a breakout before the enemy could complete their preparations. Staying in the school meant certain death, but moving across open ground under fire was equally dangerous. She explained the plan to Morrison and Chen while coordinating with Wheeler to provide covering fire from his position. The Apache pilot agreed to provide suppressive fire during their movement, but warned that his ammunition was running low and additional missile launches were forcing him to maintain distance from the target area. Maria would have to time their breakout perfectly to take advantage of the brief window when enemy fire was suppressed. Hassan's radio intercepts revealed that enemy reinforcements were arriving to completely seal off the area. Local militia groups were setting up roadblocks to prevent any American relief force from reaching the school. The insurgents were willing to sacrifice significant resources to ensure this operation succeeded, suggesting they were targeting someone specific. Maria began to suspect that her squad had been deliberately led into this trap. The intelligence about minimal threat levels and routine patrol requirements seemed designed to put her team in this exact position. Someone had provided detailed information about American patrol routes and timing to set up this elaborate ambush. The enemy assault resumed with renewed intensity as fighters moved back into position around the school. This time they used a different tactic, advancing through underground tunnels that connected the buildings in this area. Maria could hear movement beneath the floor and realized they were about to be attacked from below as well as from all sides. She ordered her team to move to the strongest part of the building's foundation while calling for immediate evacuation by helicopter. The Apache pilot explained that landing in the current tactical situation was impossible, but he was calling for a rescue helicopter with heavy escort to attempt extraction from a nearby rooftop. The sounds from underground grew louder as enemy fighters prepared to breach through the floor. Maria positioned her team to cover the most likely emergence points while Morrison tried to maintain radio contact with incoming rescue forces. Chen prepared her medical supplies, knowing that casualties were inevitable in any breakout attempt. A massive explosion rocked the building as insurgents detonated charges beneath the school's foundation. Part of the floor collapsed, creating gaps through which enemy fighters began emerging. Maria fired controlled bursts at the emerging threats, while Morrison called for immediate close air support on their exact position. The firefight became chaotic as enemies emerged from multiple points simultaneously. Maria found herself firing in 3 directions, while trying to maintain communication with her scattered team members. Wheeler's sniper fire from outside was helping to control some approaches, but the situation was rapidly becoming untenable. Chen was hit by shrapnel from another underground explosion, suffering serious wounds to her leg and abdomen. Morrison dragged her to better cover while Maria continued engaging targets that seemed to multiply faster than she could eliminate them. The enemy had clearly planned this assault down to the smallest detail. The distinctive sound of an incoming rescue helicopter mixed with the continuing gunfire as a Black Hawk approached under heavy escort. But enemy fighters were ready for this as well, launching multiple missiles at the aircraft while maintaining their ground assault on the school building. The helicopter pilot was forced to abort his first approach. Maria realized they needed to reach higher ground to have any chance of extraction. She made the dangerous decision to fight their way to the school's roof, where a helicopter might be able to hover long enough for emergency evacuation. The route would take them directly through areas controlled by enemy fighters. Morrison carried the wounded Chen, while Maria cleared the way with precise fire that conserved her remaining ammunition. Every round had to count as they fought there, way up a stairway partially blocked by debris from the continuing explosions. Wheeler provided covering fire from his external position, but he was also running low on ammunition. They reached the roof as the Black Hawk made its second approach, this time with Apache gunships providing intensive covering fire against enemy positions. The noise was tremendous as aircraft weapons engaged targets throughout the neighborhood, while the rescue helicopter descended toward the school roof. Maria was laying down covering fire when the enemy's final trap was sprung. Hidden fighters opened fire from concealed positions on surrounding rooftops, creating a crossfire that caught her team in the open. The rescue helicopter was forced to pull away as missiles and heavy weapons fire filled the air around it. Standing exposed on the rooftop with nowhere left to run, Maria felt the first bullet strike her body armor with tremendous force. The impact spun her around, but she kept firing at enemy positions while Morrison tried to drag the wounded Chen toward better cover. More bullets followed in rapid succession. The world seemed to slow down as Maria continued fighting despite multiple hits to her body armor and equipment. She could feel warm blood flowing from wounds, but adrenaline kept her moving and shooting back at enemy fighters. Her training took over completely as conscious thought became impossible. Wheeler's voice screamed through the radio that Maria was down, but she could still see him firing from his position near the building. Morrison was calling for immediate medical evacuation while trying to return fire and protect Chen simultaneously. The situation had become a nightmare with no apparent solution. As darkness began to creep into Maria's vision, she could hear the sound of additional aircraft approaching in the distance. Reinforcements were finally arriving in strength, but she wasn't sure if they would be in time to save her squad or recover their bodies from this carefully planned killing ground. Maria felt her body hitting the rooftop concrete as consciousness faded in and out like a broken radio signal. Through the haze of shock and blood loss, she could hear Morrison's desperate voice calling for immediate medical evacuation, while Wheeler's sniper rifle continued cracking from his position across the courtyard. The taste of copper filled her mouth as she tried to assess the damage to her body. The enemy fire had been devastating and precise. Multiple bullets had found gaps in her body armor, penetrating her chest, abdomen, and extremities. She could feel warm blood pooling beneath her as she lay on the hot concrete, each breath becoming more difficult than the last. But somehow, impossibly, she remained conscious enough to understand what was happening around her. Morrison crawled over to her position while Chen, despite her own serious wounds, began applying emergency medical treatment with shaking hands. The medic's training took over even as her own blood stained the rooftop, and she worked frantically to stop Maria's bleeding with field dressings and pressure bandages. Her voice was calm despite the chaos, calling out vital signs and wound assessments. The rescue helicopter was making another approach, this time with 2 Apache gunships providing intensive covering fire against every known enemy position. The pilot's voice came through Morrison's radio with grim determination, announcing that he was coming in regardless of ground fire. The crew chief could be heard preparing medical equipment for immediate trauma treatment. Wheeler had moved to a new firing position and was systematically eliminating enemy fighters who were trying to prevent the helicopter landing. His precise shots were buying crucial seconds, but ammunition was critically low for everyone. The sniper's voice remained steady as he called out targets and confirmed kills, protecting his wounded squad leader with deadly accuracy. Hassan's voice crackled through the radio with intercepted enemy communications indicating that insurgent commanders were ordering their fighters to prevent evacuation at all costs. Additional rocket-propelled grenades were being moved into position to destroy the rescue helicopter if it attempted to land. The enemy was prepared to sacrifice everything to ensure no Americans survived this ambush. Maria tried to speak but could only produce weak sounds as blood filled her throat. Chen immediately positioned her to clear the airway while continuing to work on the multiple gunshot wounds. The medic's assessment was grim. Maria was losing blood faster than it could be replaced, and several wounds appeared to have damaged vital organs. The Black Hawk touched down on the rooftop amid a storm of enemy fire, its crew chief and flight medic immediately jumping out to assist with casualty evacuation. The aircraft's door guns returned fire at muzzle flashes from surrounding buildings, while the medical team worked frantically to stabilize Maria for transport. Every second on the ground increased the risk of a rocket-propelled grenade strike. Morrison helped carry Maria toward the helicopter, while Chen limped alongside, still applying pressure to bleeding wounds. Wheeler provided covering fire until the last possible moment, before sprinting toward the aircraft himself. The crew chief was shouting instructions about medical priorities, while the pilot fought to maintain position despite continuing ground fire. As they loaded Maria into the helicopter, Chen continued advanced trauma treatment using the aircraft's medical equipment. The flight medic took over primary care while Chen provided crucial information about wounds, blood loss, and treatments already administered. Both medical personnel worked with practiced efficiency, despite the aircraft's movement and continuing enemy fire. The helicopter lifted off immediately, with Apache gunships following to provide escort during the flight to the nearest medical facility. Maria could hear radio chatter about her condition being transmitted to doctors who were preparing for emergency surgery. The crew chief was coordinating with multiple hospitals to ensure the best possible trauma care would be available. During the flight, Maria's condition deteriorated rapidly as shock and blood loss took their toll. The flight medic worked desperately to maintain blood pressure and breathing, while Chen continued assisting despite her own wounds. Both medical personnel knew they were fighting against time and massive internal injuries that required immediate surgical intervention. The helicopter landed at a forward medical facility where a trauma team was waiting with equipment already prepared. Maria was transferred immediately to an operating room where military surgeons began emergency procedures to control bleeding and repair damaged organs. The medical team worked with the efficiency that comes from treating too many similar cases. For the next several hours, Maria's life hung in the balance as surgeons worked to repair the extensive damage caused by multiple high-velocity rifle rounds. Several bullets had fragmented inside her body, creating complex wound patterns that required careful removal of metal fragments and repair of torn tissue. The surgical team fought to save every damaged organ system. Wheeler, Morrison, and Hassan waited in the medical facility's reception area after their own wounds were treated. None of them spoke much as they listened to periodic updates about Maria's condition. The medical staff was professional but honest about the severity of her injuries and the uncertain prognosis for survival. Chen was in surgery herself, but her wounds were less severe and doctors were optimistic about her recovery. The medic had saved Maria's life with her quick treatment on the rooftop, possibly buying enough time for the surgical team to have a chance at success. Her actions under fire demonstrated the highest levels of military medicine. Military investigators arrived to begin documenting the ambush and collecting evidence about how intelligence had been compromised. The attack's sophistication and coordination indicated a significant intelligence breach that had allowed enemy forces to plan the operation in advance. Someone had provided detailed information about patrol routes and timing. The official casualty report listed Maria as critically wounded with life-threatening injuries from multiple gunshot wounds sustained during enemy contact. Her survival was considered doubtful by medical personnel, and notifications were being prepared for her family in Los Angeles. The report would describe heroic actions under fire and exceptional leadership during the engagement. As night fell over the medical facility, Maria remained in critical condition following extensive surgery. Her heart had stopped twice during the operation, but was successfully restarted each time. The medical team had managed to control most bleeding sources, but internal damage was severe, and infection remained a serious threat. Morrison sat beside her hospital bed during the hours after surgery, maintaining a quiet vigil while medical equipment monitored her vital signs. The radio operator blamed himself for not detecting the ambush sooner, despite there being no realistic way he could have known about the elaborate trap. His guilt was shared by the entire squad. The next 48 hours would determine whether Maria's body could recover from the massive trauma she had sustained. Military doctors had done everything possible, but survival would depend on her own fighting spirit and the complex healing processes that no medical intervention could guarantee. Her family was being flown in from California. Outside the medical facility, additional security was being established as intelligence suggested. Enemy forces might attempt to attack the hospital to finish what they had started. Maria's survival had become a symbol of American military resilience. and protecting her was now a matter of strategic importance beyond just medical necessity. The medical monitors beside Maria's bed showed irregular patterns that worried the nursing staff throughout the night. Her heart rate fluctuated wildly between dangerously low and critically high readings, while her blood pressure remained unstable despite multiple medications. The trauma surgeon checked on her every hour, adjusting treatments and monitoring for signs of complications that could prove fatal. By the morning of the second day, Maria had developed a severe infection that threatened to overwhelm her already weakened immune system. Her temperature spiked to dangerous levels, while her body fought against the massive bacterial invasion that often follows traumatic wounds. The medical team immediately began aggressive antibiotic treatment, but infection in trauma patients often proves resistant to standard medications. Morrison maintained his vigil beside her bed, speaking quietly about shared memories and future plans as if she could hear everything. Medical research suggested that familiar voices might help unconscious patients maintain their will to live. So he talked continuously about their squad's experiences and the people waiting for her return home. Chen had recovered enough from her own surgery to visit Maria's room, walking slowly with the help of crutches. The medic reviewed her field treatment decisions with the trauma doctors, looking for anything that might improve Maria's current care. Her quick thinking on the rooftop had definitely saved Maria's life, but the extent of recovery remained uncertain. Wheeler and Hassan took turns providing security for the medical facility, while also visiting Maria's room whenever possible. The sniper had become unusually quiet since the ambush, blaming himself for not preventing the enemy from achieving such devastating fire superiority. His precise shooting had saved lives during the extraction, but guilt over Maria's injuries consumed him. Military investigators had discovered evidence of a sophisticated intelligence breach that allowed enemy forces to plan the ambush with detailed knowledge of American patrol patterns. Someone with access to classified information had provided insurgents with exact timing and routes, turning a routine mission into a carefully planned trap, designed to kill or capture specific personnel. The investigation revealed that Maria's squad had been specifically targeted because of her reputation for successful operations and her squad's effectiveness in previous missions. Enemy propaganda had identified her as a high-value target whose death or capture would provide significant psychological victory against American forces in the region. Maria's parents arrived from Los Angeles after a frantic journey involving multiple flights and military transportation. Her mother carried the same rosary beads she had clutched when Maria first deployed, praying continuously in Spanish while her father stood silently beside the hospital bed. Neither had ever seen their daughter look so fragile and vulnerable. The trauma surgeon explained Maria's condition honestly to her parents, describing the extensive damage and uncertain prognosis. Multiple bullets had caused severe internal injuries that would require months of recovery, even if she survived the current critical period. The next 24 hours remained crucial for determining her ultimate survival chances. During the second night, Maria's condition suddenly deteriorated as her blood pressure dropped to dangerously low levels. The medical team rushed to stabilize her while her parents waited anxiously in the hallway. Her heart stopped for almost 3 minutes before doctors managed to restore normal rhythm. But brain damage from oxygen deprivation remained a serious concern. Military chaplains arrived to provide spiritual support for both Maria's family and her squad members. The emotional trauma of the ambush was affecting everyone involved, and professional counseling was being arranged for all survivors. Combat stress reactions were normal following such intense experiences, but needed proper treatment to prevent long-term psychological damage. Meanwhile, Special Operations Forces were planning a retaliatory strike against the insurgent cell responsible for the ambush. Intelligence had identified several key leaders and their operating locations, and mission planners were developing operations to eliminate the threat and capture those responsible for compromising American security. On the morning of the third day, Maria's vital signs showed slight improvement for the first time since the attack. Her temperature had decreased slightly, and blood pressure was responding better to medications. The improvement was minimal, but it gave her medical team hope that her body might be starting to win the battle against infection and trauma. Chen spent hours beside Maria's bed, talking about their shared experiences and future plans for when they both returned home. The medic described her own recovery progress and shared messages from other soldiers in their unit who were anxiously waiting for news about their Squad leader's condition, Morrison, had not left the hospital since Maria's arrival, surviving on coffee and brief naps in the waiting room chair. His dedication impressed the medical staff, who had seen many examples of military loyalty, but few as intense as his commitment to staying with his wounded squad leader during her most critical hours. The investigation into the intelligence breach had identified several suspects with access to patrol information, and military security was conducting intensive interrogations to determine how enemy forces had obtained such detailed operational data. The ambush's sophistication indicated months of planning and preparation by experienced insurgent leaders. Wheeler had requested permission to join the retaliatory mission against the insurgent cell, but his superiors denied the request due to his emotional involvement in the case. Instead, he was ordered to remain available for debriefing and to provide testimony about the ambush that would be used in planning future operations. As evening approached on the third day, Maria's condition remained stable but critical. Her body was slowly beginning to heal from the massive trauma, but the extent of permanent damage would not be known for weeks or months. Brain function appeared normal based on limited testing, but comprehensive neurological assessment would have to wait. Until she regained consciousness, the trauma surgeon was cautiously optimistic about Maria's survival chances for the first time since her arrival. While her recovery would be long and difficult, her body was showing signs of resilience that suggested she might overcome the worst of her injuries. The next phase would focus on preventing complications and supporting the healing process. Military leadership was closely monitoring Maria's case due to its implications for operational security and morale. Her survival had become symbolically important for American forces in Iraq, and her recovery would send a message about military determination and resilience. In the face of enemy attacks, Hassan had been working with intelligence analysts to provide detailed information about enemy communications intercepted during the ambush. His language skills were proving valuable in understanding the insurgent organization responsible for the attack and planning appropriate responses to prevent similar incidents. Outside the medical facility, additional security measures had been implemented based on intelligence suggesting possible follow-up attacks. Enemy forces were known to target hospitals and medical facilities, and protecting wounded American personnel had become a priority, requiring significant resources and personnel. 48 hours after the ambush that should have killed her, Maria's heart monitor showed a steady rhythm that surprised everyone in the medical facility. The trauma surgeon stood beside her bed, reviewing charts that documented what should have been impossible. A patient with 15 gunshot wounds was not only alive, but showing signs of improvement. Her vital signs had stabilized overnight, and infection markers were finally beginning to decrease. The breakthrough came when Maria's eyes opened for the first time since the surgery. She couldn't speak due to the breathing tube, but her eyes tracked movement and responded to simple commands from the medical staff. Morrison was the first person she saw, and tears streamed down his face as he realized his squad leader was going to survive against all odds. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the trauma surgeon who had operated on Maria, called her survival nothing short of miraculous. The bullets had missed vital arteries by millimeters in several cases, and her body had somehow compensated for massive blood loss better than anyone had expected. Her physical conditioning and fighting spirit had carried her through the most critical period. Within hours of regaining consciousness, Maria was trying to communicate about her squad's welfare despite being unable to speak. The medical staff brought Wheeler, Chen, and Hassan to her bedside, so she could see that everyone had survived the ambush. Her relief was visible even through the pain medications and breathing equipment. The news of Maria's survival spread quickly through military units across Iraq, becoming a symbol of American military resilience and determination. Soldiers who had never met her personally were inspired by stories of her survival and recovery. Her name became synonymous with the fighting spirit that kept troops going during the darkest moments of deployment. The Special Operations mission against the insurgent cell responsible for the ambush had been executed with devastating efficiency. Intelligence gathered from the hospital security investigation led operators to 3 safe houses where key planners were captured or killed. The enemy's sophisticated intelligence network was dismantled, preventing future attacks of similar scope and coordination. Wheeler finally spoke about his feelings regarding the ambush during a counseling session arranged by military chaplains. The sniper had been carrying enormous guilt about not preventing Maria's injuries, despite having saved multiple lives with his accurate covering fire. Professional counseling helped him understand that he had performed heroically under impossible circumstances. Chen's own recovery progressed rapidly, and she was soon back to limited duty, while continuing physical therapy for her leg wounds. The medic had been recommended for a medal recognizing her life-saving actions under fire, both for treating Maria on the rooftop and for continuing medical care, despite her own serious injuries. Her quick thinking had been crucial to Maria's survival. Morrison finally left the hospital for more than a few hours when Maria was transferred out of intensive care to a regular recovery ward. The radio operator had been surviving on coffee and determination, refusing to leave until he was certain his squad leader would survive. His loyalty had impressed everyone at the medical facility. Hassan's language skills proved invaluable in interrogating captured insurgents from the ambush operation. His ability to understand cultural nuances and dialects helped extract crucial information about enemy networks and future planned attacks. The intelligence gathered was already being used to prevent similar ambushes against other American units. Maria's parents maintained a constant presence at her bedside as she began the long process of physical recovery. Her mother's rosary beads had worn smooth from constant handling, and her father had learned basic Arabic phrases to communicate with hospital staff. Both parents were amazed by their daughter's strength and determination. The investigation into the intelligence breach concluded with the arrest of an Iraqi translator who had been providing detailed patrol information to insurgent groups. His access to classified mission plans had enabled the enemy to plan the ambush with precise timing and positioning. Security protocols were immediately updated to prevent similar compromises. Physical therapy began as soon as Maria was strong enough to sit up in bed. The extent of her injuries meant that recovery would take months, possibly years, but her determination impressed the medical staff. She insisted on beginning exercises earlier than recommended, driven by her desire to return to duty and rejoin her squad. Military leadership visited Maria's bedside to personally thank her for her service and to discuss her future in the Army. While her injuries would likely prevent return to combat operations, her experience and leadership skills were valuable for training and advisory roles. The decision about her military future would wait until her physical recovery was more complete. The story of Maria's survival against impossible odds became part of military lore, told and retold across bases throughout Iraq and Afghanistan. New recruits learned about her courage under fire and her squad's loyalty during the darkest moments of the ambush. Her example inspired countless soldiers facing their own dangerous deployments. Chen received orders transferring her to a medical training facility where she would help develop new trauma treatment protocols based on her experiences during the ambush. Her field medical work had saved Maria's life and demonstrated innovative techniques under combat conditions. The knowledge gained would help save future lives. Wheeler was assigned to a training command where his sniper skills and combat experience would be used to prepare new marksmen for deployment. His precise shooting during the ambush had been studied by military analysts looking to improve training programs. His expertise would help ensure other soldiers were better prepared for similar situations. Morrison and Hassan remained together as a radio team, but their new assignment involved working with intelligence units to improve communication security and prevent future information breaches. Their experience during the ambush provided valuable insights into how enemy forces could exploit American communication patterns and procedures. The insurgent cell responsible for the ambush was completely eliminated through follow-up operations that captured or killed all major participants. The sophisticated intelligence network they had built was dismantled, and security improvements prevented similar operations from succeeding. Maria's squad had not only survived, but had helped prevent future attacks. Maria's recovery continued steadily over the following months, though she would never return to full physical capability. Multiple surgeries were required to repair damage from the 15 bullets that had torn through her body, and some limitations would be permanent. But her survival itself was considered a complete victory against overwhelming odds. Letters poured in from soldiers throughout the military who had been inspired by Maria's story. Families of deployed troops wrote to thank her for providing hope during difficult times. Her example demonstrated that survival was possible even in the worst circumstances. giving courage to those facing similar dangers. The medal ceremony recognizing Maria's heroism was attended by military leadership from throughout the region. Her actions during the ambush, particularly her tactical decisions that saved her squad's lives, were cited as examples of exceptional leadership under extreme pressure. The recognition was richly deserved for her courage and sacrifice. 2 years later, Maria had recovered enough to accept a training position at Fort Benning, where she would help prepare new squad leaders for deployment. Her first-hand experience with combat leadership and survival against overwhelming odds made her uniquely qualified to train the next generation of military leaders. The ambush in Fallujah had been intended to kill or capture an entire American squad, but instead it had demonstrated the resilience and determination that defined the best of military service. Maria's survival and her squad's loyalty under fire became a story that would inspire soldiers for generations to come.